Unhappy is he to whom the memories of childhood bring only fear and sadness. Wretched is he who looks back upon lone hours in vast and dismal chambers, with brown hangings and maddening rows of antique books, or upon odd watches in twilight groves of grotesque, gigantic, and vine-encumbered trees. Such a lot the gods gave to me. I know not where I was born, save that the castle was infinitely old and infinitely horrible, full of dark passages and having high ceilings where the eye could find only cobwebs and shadows. The stones in the crumbling corridors seemed always hideously damp, and there was an accursed smell everywhere, as of the piled-up corpses of dead generations. To me there was nothing grotesque in the bones and skeletons that strewed some of the stone crypts deep down among the foundations. It was never light, so that I used sometimes to light candles and gaze steadily at them for relief. Nor was there any sun outdoors, since the terrible trees grew high above the topmost accessible tower. There was one black tower which reached above the trees into the unknown outer sky, but that was partly ruined and could not be ascended save by a well-nigh impossible climb up the sheer wall. I must have lived years in this place, but I cannot measure the time. I think that whoever nursed me must have been shockingly aged, since my first conception of a living person was that of something mockingly like myself, but distorted, shriveled, and decaying like the castle. From books I learned all that I know. No teacher urged or guided me, and I do not recall hearing any human voice in all those years, not even my own. Once I tried to escape from the forest, but as I went farther from the castle the shade grew denser and the air more filled with brooding fear, so that I ran frantically back lest I lose my way in a labyrinth of nighted silence. So through endless twilights I dreamed and waited, though I know not what I waited for. Then in the shadowy solitude my longing for light grew so frantic that I could rest no more, and I raised entreating hands to the single black ruined tower that reached above the forest into the unknown outer sky. At last I resolved to scale that tower, fall though I might, for it were better to glimpse the sky and perish than to live without ever beholding day. In the dank twilight I climbed the worn and aged stone stairs until I reached the level where they ceased, and thereafter clung perilously to small footholds leading upwards. Ghastly and terrible was that dead, airless cylinder of rock. All at once, after an infinity of awesome sightless crawling, I felt my head touch a solid thing, and I knew I must have gained the roof. Finally my testing hand found the barrier yielding. Believing now that I was at a prodigious height, I fumbled about for windows, that I might look for the first time upon the moon and stars, but on every hand I was disappointed. All I found were vast shelves of marble, bearing odious oblong boxes of disturbing size. Unexpectedly, I came upon a doorway where hung a portal of stone. With a supreme burst of strength, I dragged it open, and as I did so, there came upon me the purest ecstasy I have ever known, for shining tranquilly through a steel grate shone the radiant full moon. The sudden veiling of the moon by a cloud caused me to stumble, and I felt my way more carefully in the darkness. And then the moon came out. Nothing I had before undergone could compare in terror with what I now saw, for there stretched around me nothing less than the solid ground, decked by marble slabs and columns, and overshadowed by an ancient stone church whose ruined spire shined spectrally in the moonlight. Half unconscious, I staggered out upon the path that stretched away in two directions. My mind, stunned and chaotic as it was, still held the frantic craving for light. I knew not who I was or what my surroundings might be, though as I continued to stumble along I became conscious of a kind of fearsome latent memory that made my progress not wholly fortuitous. I passed under an arch out of that region of slabs and columns and wandered through the open country, sometimes following the visible road, but sometimes leaving it curiously to tread across meadows where only occasional ruins bespoke the ancient presence of a forgotten road. Over 2 hours must have passed before I reached my goal, a venerable ivy castle in a thickly wooded park, its windows gorgeously ablaze with light and sending forth the sounds of the gayest revelry. Advancing to one of these, I looked in and saw an oddly dressed company making merry and speaking brightly to one another. I now stepped through the low window into the brilliantly lighted room, stepping as I did so from my single bright moment of hope to my blackest convulsion of despair and realization. Scarcely had I crossed the sill when there descended upon the whole company a sudden fear of hideous intensity, distorting every face and evoking the most horrible screams from nearly every throat. Flight was universal, and many plunged blindly and awkwardly in their race to escape. As I stood in the apartment alone and dazed, I trembled at the thought of what might be lurking near me unseen. When I moved towards one of the alcoves, I thought I detected a presence there. As I approached the arch, I began to perceive the presence more clearly, and then I beheld in full frightful vividness the indescribable monstrosity which had changed a merry company to a herd of delirious fugitives. I cannot even hint what it was like, for it was a compound of all that is abnormal and detestable. It was the ghoulish shade of decay, the awful bearing of that which the merciful earth should always hide. God knows it was not of this world. Nearly mad, I found myself yet able to throw out a hand to ward up the fetid apparition which pressed so close, when in one cataclysmic second of hellish accident, my fingers touched the rotting outstretched paw of the monster beneath the golden arch. I did not shriek, but all the fiendish ghouls that ride the night wind shrieked for me. I knew in that second all that had been. I remembered beyond the castle and the trees, and most terrible of all, the unholy abomination that stood leering before me. In a dream, I fled from that haunted and accursed pile. I know always that I am an outsider, a stranger in this century and among those who are still men. This I've known ever since I stretched out my fingers to that abomination within that great gilded frame, stretched out my fingers and touched a cold and unyielding surface of polished glass.